Hey everyone, it is time to check one of the fathers of a famous genre. But let's answer this question. Has Castlevania Symphony of the Night aged? For that, let's dive into the usual topics, because there's so much to say about this game. Without further ado, let's begin. I have said it before, and I'll say it again. Castlevania's story feels, for the most part, all over the place. Sometimes it is canon, sometimes it isn't. Ironically, Symphony of the Night wasn't canon at first. It was supposed to be a spin-off, where we follow Alucard, Dracula's son, where he awakes after something like 300 years, between Castlevania 3, Dracula's Curse, and Symphony. However, this game opens with a famous Belmont, Richter, right in the last area of Rondo of Blood, where Dracula is all what's left. I'll come back for this scene later, but in summary, what we know is that Richter was able to beat Dracula, and everything seemed okay for around 40 years, but then he suddenly disappeared. Ironically, Castlevania appeared once again, which was supposed to happen after 100 years. This is where Alucard woke up, ready to investigate what's going on. Now, back when I played this game like 25 years ago, I hadn't that much idea because I hadn't played the previous games until a couple of years later. Needless to say that if you don't know part of the context here, it feels like you don't really get what is going on. For example, you see Marie Renard, but it is like, okay, someone is looking for Richter, and Alucard talks about other Belmont? Like, these kinds of details are the ones that get better the more you know different Castlevanias. However, it wasn't that friendly, as you needed multiple consoles and games. In any case, Symphony of the Night amazed so much that it became into a mainline game. A little parenthesis here. To me, this is something pathetic out of companies, like, if the game does well, it is canon, but if it doesn't, it isn't. Freaking clowns. While it is a simpler story, I liked it, and I believe it became much more relevant as more people got to know what happened previously with Trevor Belmont. Now, my only huge complaint here is that Castlevania Requiem has the PSP voice acting, which is way different to the original. And yeah, when I listened to Richter and Dracula conversation, my expression changed in disapproval, because I wanted to hear a miserable pile of secrets. Die, monster, you don't belong in this world.
What is a man? A miserable little pile of secrets. But enough talk. How about you?
Ha! Mankind. A cesspit of hatred and lies. Fight for them then, and die for their sins!
And yeah, the PSP has a cleaner audio, but I am sure it isn't as memorable as the original PS1. At least I won't remember any of it. To me, the story aged quite well. I will say it is an 8. I mean, once putting everything in context, it is quite good, and different in comparison to previous Castlevania games. Castlevania Symphony of the Night was created with an idea in mind, sets itself apart from its roots, and this is quite interesting, considering that the series was getting kinda stagnant. Just by hearing the name, you knew what you were buying. It is worth mentioning that when it first came out, it didn't stir that much the water. It was time later, when the veterans who tried the game noticed it was unique, it was a gem, and effectively, it is thanks to this game that the genre known as Metroidvanias was born. Games that focus on exploration while keeping RPG elements. But what made Symphony so unique? The deal that the son of Dracula lost his powers, and slowly but surely he was getting stronger, was something that captivated a lot the audience. But also, finding your way through the castle, a hellish maze using ideas seen in Metroid. A non-linear journey like this was something new and exciting, but I gotta be honest, there are certain things that haven't aged that well, at least in my opinion. Just to make things clear, I have finished this game many times, back in early 2000, then in like 2008, 2014, 2018, and now once again. But once you know how to beat the game, there is a kind of magic that is lost. And yeah, using the shield rod made everything a walk in the park. However, in this time around I decided to start in hard difficulty and avoiding the usual strategies I tried back then. In other words, mid swords for the win. And something to notice is that the knockback is kinda annoying in this game. There are some enemies that deal multi-hits that can be tricky to avoid. And once you get hit, chances are that the second move will also impact, pushing the player to bounce left and right. By this point, I was solving things a la vieja escuela, square up cause I am not using healing items. Yeah, but that is something I would have preferred to change. Another detail I am noticing after playing multiple different Metroidvanias is that Symphony was quite small. Yeah, I remember that the first time I finished this game it took me a lot of time. One of the main issues is that I didn't know the language, and something as trivial as "it opens blue doors" was something I miss plenty of times. The same idea happened with the wear at the clock, use the goggles, etc, etc. It is worth mentioning that some of these mechanics became so popular that they are still being used up until this day. This is a good example of it. The clock became legendary in many ways. It turned into something like a waterfall. The moment you see one, you know there is going to be something. Cough cough most of times. Well, in Metroidvanias you see a clock, and you know that patience is a virtue. But well, the thing is that once you got to know all of those things, the game became quite short, as you can finish it in a matter of hours. In any case, the first part of the game was a long journey for me. Heck, when I first finished the game it felt incomplete, like, oh, it isn't usual that at level 20 you're finishing the tale. Even the ending was like, there is something wrong here. After testing I found out how to beat Richter, and oh boy, getting to see the inverted castle was something that felt so unique, because it meant that the level design had to be executed in a creative way, of course to avoid getting stuck and stuff like that. The only detail about the inverted castle is that it felt kinda cold, menacing in a way, as there weren't many puzzles as in the first part, but bosses became relentless. At least the first time I got here, some of them handed my sorry arse really good, and yep, you know what happened to plenty of us against this motherfucker. This version of the game was terrific. Now, something I still love about true Metroidvanias is that they do not hold your hand. There might be special moves that you need to get on your own. There might be ways to access areas way earlier. There are secrets left and right. Your curiosity as a player is rewarded as you play. You get to know new things each time you begin a new file. That is something Symphony did so well, that when you heard the complete castle was 200.6%, people challenged that idea. Guess what happens once you level up the sword familiar? Guess what happens once you try something unusual? Yep, as a player you acquired a level of proficiency, that even after finishing the game so many times, it was still entertaining to play, because who knows what was behind a particular weapon, weird looking areas, gears left between two different rooms, and so on. To me, its gameplay is a 9. At least nowadays, Symphony offers a beautiful experience, but in this time the deal about knockbacks is something that I see with other eyes. It could have been polished a bit more, and in a certain way, extended slightly more the experience, as some areas were so amazing, but really small. However, as a first attempt, I definitely understand why I used to look at it as a 10. Despite that, we all know it left a mark big enough, but I would have liked to see some of the unfinished areas or discarded areas, however you wanna name them. In the graphics section, I check glitches, aesthetics, performance and other visual things. And yeah, I mentioned part of its gameplay. This game was able to be broken in so many ways that they felt like real features. Perhaps on this time around I experienced one of the absolute classics. In the inverted castle this room wasn't detected for some reason, it didn't matter what I tried. Now, looking at it in a picky way, it was annoying that some areas needed to be traversed on the very borders, otherwise some blocks weren't counted as visited. So yeah, at least that is something I thought was frustrating, and the game reminded me that with this little bug. Ah well. Now, if there is something that impressed me so much is that Castlevania didn't succumb to the pressure of trying to be a clunky, ugly arse 3D game as plenty of franchises did back in the day. I know Sony was putting some pressure, as the 3D became something new, but I am glad they didn't jump into that train, because there is a reason why not so many people remember Castlevania 64 in comparison to Symphony. Sometimes new and hype doesn't mean it is better. And it was nice to see how this game polished so many actions, that it feels like it was made out of pure love, unlike many games nowadays. Let's keep in mind that it wasn't a mainline Castlevania, so I wouldn't be surprised if there was a tight budget, and despite that, each area was created in an amazing way. The same deal with enemies. Symphony's pixelated art is simply gorgeous. And now that I played once again, you have me looking at those dynamic backgrounds, attacks, effects. Heck, it is impressive that enemies died in specific and unique ways. For example, the book in the library throwing letters. But it is also fair to look at the other side of the coin. There is a good part of the inverted castle where the imagination starts to get a bit stagnant, as you end up seeing the same enemies in multiple areas. Maybe that is my perception, but Jacob bones start to appear so frequently, they ended up losing their charm. Whatever the case, to me the graphics are a 10. Despite previously mentioned hiccups, Symphony is still an excellent game on this department. And last but not least, its music. Symphony of the Night has 38 tracks, composed by Michiru Yamane, and what can I say? She threw so many different techniques into the mix that this OST became legendary. Back in early 2000s, I met people that had no idea about Castlevania, but they had the soundtrack, and I remember hearing it a couple of times in public places. And let me tell you that unless you go to a gaming plaza or event, listening to BGMs is something really rare, but Castlevania Symphony of the Night broke that barrier. Now, what makes Symphony so unique is that it has rock, metal, classical, baroque, jazz, ambience, unnerving tracks, electronic, and whatnot. Rather than filling the freaking disc with so many movies that you are going to forget, it focuses on something much more important, its ambience. Each composition gave a lot of life to this journey. Since the very beginning, that Dracula's castle hit different, followed by Dance of Gold, Marble Gallery, Tower of Mist, and then freaking wood carving partita. Oh my god, the very beginning of this game hits like a truck. There is no need to mention how it radically changes once you visit the Clock Tower and the Tragic Prince starts to play. Oof, simply beautiful. It's been 25 years since I listened to this OST, and from time to time I still listen to it, because it's simply gorgeous. Now let's be fair, things that could be improved here are the length of some compositions, because they start to cycle in a repetitive way. For example, lost paintings. Once you visit the inverted castle, there are plenty of areas that hit you with that track, but the thing is that it lasts for around 1.5 minutes, and while it gives a nice and homogeneous vibe, it can start to feel tiring after traversing multiple areas with the same track. And on the other hand, compositions like Final Toccata cannot really shine because there are many things that suddenly cut the track, like save rooms if you change from one area to another and so on. And it has an amazing transition, but for the most part you will only listen to the first 2 minutes, perhaps 3, but then you change to another area with the same track, but it has to start playing once again. Yep, these kinds of little details kill a bit some tracks, but that is just my opinion. However, I won't deny that the soundtrack alone is a masterpiece. I will give it a 10. Castlevania Symphony of the Night final score is a 9.2. To me, it's still a must play. Yes, it has aged. There are certain things that the industry has polished in a better way, and that won't be denied. But despite that, I still consider it's worth playing nowadays, as it is still holding quite nicely. With this, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.